Welcome to Platform Engineering Day 0, the origin story. So a little bit about me. I'm an engineering manager with Google Cloud. My team essentially helps customers with applications and app delivery, platforms, developer experience, and now agents as well. I've been in tech for probably just a little under 2 decades now. And I've worked in a variety of different places. When I started at Google about 6 years ago, that was the time when I finally got to hang up my pager, which was kind of nice to not have to be on call anymore. And if I was still out and on a pager and in the field, my title would probably have evolved into something like platform engineer as well. So a little bit of what we're going to go through today. We're going to talk about just some definitions. A lot of you might have seen this and had gone through, hopefully to catch some great content at the Platform Engineering Day yesterday. There are a ton of other great talks on this track that you can find in the schedule as well. And we'll do a little bit about the principles and what platforms look like. And then from there, talk about building a platform roadmap and some of the pathways into getting your MVP, or your minimum viable platform. So let's start with the age-old question, right? What does platform engineering mean? And if you find the old canonical definition, a lot of this is traced back to something that you might have seen from a post by Evan Bottcher from ThoughtWorks on Martin Fowler's website. And it's what I think about platforms, actually what I think when I think about platforms. So a couple things that I'll call out there is the key points around self-service. This being an internal product, and that's something likely a lot of you have heard when it comes to platform engineering, is this product mindset. And then the idea of being able to have autonomous delivery, or enabling your developers to be autonomous when it comes to being able to deploy and run their platforms. And then a slightly reduced and simpler definition from the Dora research project, which is out now. There is the State of AI-Assisted Software Development report, is essentially that this platform is a set of capabilities that is shared across multiple applications or services. Okay, so what does that even really mean, right? So when we think about what we might want a platform to look like, or what we define this as, you may think of these golden pathways. And these golden pathways lead you through a beautiful portal, and there is one road for all. And if you build it, they will come, and there's an emerald city at the end of it, where you have ephemeral environments that can deploy in under 2 hours. You have a collection of capabilities. You have a set of resources and infrastructure, and then maybe a platform orchestrator underlying all of that helps connect all of these moving pieces together. You've got champions on the exec team. You've got your platform product team that's fully built out, and all of these happy customers. And your happy customers are your internal developers. But in reality, if you look behind the curtain, what it really might look like is a little bit of wizardry and magic, maybe a lot of moving parts, a lot of cognitive overhead, where you kind of have to figure out how and what steps to go through for the developer. There's the one guy, Bob, that is the one person that can help with onboarding new users and setting up service accounts, and maybe a collection of code. And then probably a lot of other good things there as well. Like maybe there is a portal process underway. Maybe you have some really great pipelines set up and templates for your greenfield applications that are up and running that don't necessarily solve your legacy stuff. So we're really, a lot of places are somewhere in some stage of the process. Your documentation may be part of that platform. You may have people that are part of that platform that are executing on that, and then some tools and collections. And as far as the team goes, maybe it's a team that started as the infra team and then just got kind of rebranded as the DevOps team, and then got rebranded as the platform team, because that's just sometimes the thing that happens. So if we're thinking about fixing this, the first thing actually is to think about, do you need a platform? And I know we're all here because we want platform engineering, right? But it's mostly, do you need it at this moment in time? There's a great quote from Camille Fournier, who wrote the book literally on platform engineering, which I highly recommend. And one of the things from one of those talks is to essentially start when your glue starts causing problems. So are you delivering well on your priorities and executing? Is it maybe a little bit of a mess on the back end and you acknowledge that, but you're serving your current priorities, the machine's working, people, maybe they're not like thrilled, but they're content and not miserable. Sometimes you may be executing in a way that serves what you need to do, and the idea is don't introduce unnecessary complexity. Don't go in and build a platform and create another bottleneck for users on top of what they're doing. Essentially, this is something that is supposed to serve your internal development teams. So when all of those moving parts start to really cause a problem, when there's friction, then you really should start exploring what capabilities that you want to put into place. So we've determined that we do want a platform. We are in a new world. We're looking at being able to chart out this path and journey, and we determined that, like, let's go. We need to build out this platform. We want to be able to get rid of some of this old technical debt and modernize and accelerate processes. So first part is essentially building your own context. Whether you're the solo champion or you have some other champions in the organization that really want to do this, it's kind of building that shared language about what you're thinking of when you look at being able to create a platform engineering practice or build a platform for your users. There are a ton of great talks about the principles of platform engineering. I won't go into all of them, but essentially, we're looking at this as, you might have seen, socio-technical discipline. So there are a lot of pieces that fall into both your people, your processes, and your technology. And I know that's kind of the old adage, but I still feel like it really holds. Those are three really important parts, because it's not just what tech and tools you're implementing. Some good starting points. There is a guide to platform engineering on the Cloud blog. There's also the platform engineering book that I mentioned. And then, of course, there's the CNCF platforms white paper, which is a really good framing point of view. But maybe some key points out of all of that is essentially one, thinking about that platform as your internal product. And that product is something that you're building for your users. It should be very adaptable so your users can achieve what they need with it. Self-service is a really big part of that. Do you have the parts that allow a developer to go in and be able to create and build both the infra and the platform and the applications that they need? And then this idea of shifting down. How do you take some of the things that your users or your devs don't care about or don't want to have to work on that are maybe just toilsome, and shift that down so that the platform is now taking care of some of that automation, some of the decisions about observability, some of the decisions about security, and so on. And that's where these golden paths and guardrails come in. So it's both for your users, but also for maybe your security and your compliance departments, and so on. So what does a platform look like, or what are some examples? So this is just maybe one point of view of what some components are. And of course, it's very much going to vary based on your environment. So you might have a set of interfaces, things that you can use to be able to connect with your platform. It's the APIs, the command line, the SDKs, and the UI is a part of that too, but it definitely shouldn't be the primary interface. You might have some templates, some capabilities like your infrastructure and these different like data layers, security, policies. There's actually a really great list of different capabilities that is on the developerplatform.org website. And I've got a list of resources at the end. So if we take a look at some of the core components, on an IDP or your internal developer platform are things like having your application configuration management, ways to be able to manage those app configs as a separate entity from your app code, a way to be able to manage your environments all the way through, from your dev and QA and your local environments all the way up through your production. Method of adding in your security, role-based access, different layers of that, infrastructure automation, and then your deployment management, so CD type systems. There's another really great blueprint out there as well from ThoughtWorks that goes into a little bit about what a platform might look like, and these are centered in other types of capability areas. So your delivery infrastructure, having your API and architecture components, and this again includes both a collection of your tools and processes and people and so on. Infrastructure and telemetry, and then your customer touchpoint technology. There are also some other places to see reference architectures, both on platformengineering.org. There are different, based on some of the tooling, reference architectures out there. But this is really just to be able to help you frame and maybe see your own organization with the context of some other organizations out there. But in reality, your platform might not look like these companies' platforms. You might see these reference patterns out there for a lot of these large organizations, but your platform might not look like that, and also maybe shouldn't look like that. Really, you need to be building for the scale and for the needs of your users, for both what your users want and need. And one of the catches there is sometimes your users don't really know what they want or need, and that's part of the process, is being able to really suss out, what is going to be able to provide the most value. So let's look at building a roadmap. So as we keep building out this context, one thing to really look at is, what does platform engineering mean to you? And that you collectively is like the set of champions in the org that are trying to build out this practice. And then also, what does it mean to your team? Because that'll help with just framing. And we did a lot of context building in the beginning. And there are some notes out there too, like from the platform engineering book. If you aren't building software, you're not doing platform engineering. And what that means is, like, you're doing some of the coding, you're building tools, you're thinking about this as your software product for your internal users. And also, another one that has been thrown out there is, you're not a platform team if all you're doing is managing infrastructure. And that goes back to the different types of teams that may have evolved into the platform team. And if it's just solely around that infra automation, maybe you are doing some of these platform capabilities, but it's only one small slice of what that practice is. So that's part of where just the communications around the team and the myth busting about what is going to be an important part of the platform engineering practice is to your teams, and the whole internal organization. So as part of just building out that meaning, there's some other framings. One is to be able to understand your ecosystem. And there's a really great ecosystem guide that looks at just essentially some of the ways that your teams operate. I won't go into all of these in detail. There's actually an entire talk that goes into what the different types are. But essentially, when you're starting at type 0, YOLO, right? It's maybe people are logging directly into boxes to make updates. Maybe there isn't really a lot of consistency or version control around your infra and environments. People are kind of doing things, tapping shoulders to be able to get things done because it's what you need to be able to ship, basically. All the way up through your fully functioning, like very mature type organization that has a lot of components, that has automation, that has the version, all of the things that we were talking about previously. And so this is also just a reference. This is just like a pulse check to see, where do you feel like you are at this point in time? Another good reference as well is the maturity model. So some of you folks might have seen the maturity model through also the CNCF platform group. There can be some challenges with this, though, because the idea is not that you're just going to check the box and you've done it, right? You don't just say, okay, I'm at this level in the maturity model, and that's fine. It doesn't always account for the flexibility or adaptability or the freedom that your individual teams, not just across your entire organization, but also individual units, need to be able to target to operate in the most effective way. So it just provides a framework. So the next part of this discovery journey is really to understand and define your landscape. Again, going back to this idea of your people, process, and technology, thinking about the people that are going to be involved, all of your stakeholders. An important part of this also is how you're going to build trust with those teams, how you're going to communicate with them, what that communication and integration method looks like. Like, are your different teams working together really closely now? Are there a lot of silos and so on? And then there's a lot of the process, and I added in policy on top of that, because policy is going to be another big thing that defines sort of the platform approach, because there may be some things that you need to do from a security and a compliance point of view, and those are things that end up being really essential to bake into the platform. Are there gaps in automation? Are there things that consistently cause friction that maybe isn't documented, but that everybody knows are continually a point of either failure or a point of stress and toil across the team, or something that's just like really affecting like the deployment process, for example, like, oh, we know every time we do this, something major is gonna happen that everybody hates, and we just kind of slog through it in this sort of shared pain. Can you fix those areas of shared pain? And then also, from the tech point of view, really think about like what interfaces do people currently want to use? Are you all very centered around being able to be in the CLI and tools? Are some of your teams like more oriented where they don't want to touch a terminal at all? They want to use the UI, they want to be able to use buttons and view dashboards. So orient towards the types of tech and tools that best suit your organization. And when looking at that, really assess these existing tools. Think about whether the sentiment is more closely oriented to wanting to buy or build internally, to do in-house or outsource. Sometimes there are organizations where the easiest way to get things over the line and get funded is to be able to bring in an outside team. Sometimes it's, we don't want to do anything externally, we want to do this in-house. So really align towards what your organization, like don't swim upstream against what your organization common practices are. And so going back to this product mindset, this platform is your product for the internal users. And as a product, you want your users to want to buy into what you're selling, basically. And that's why looking at these things that you might not think of when you're building internally, like product market fit or your sales and marketing. But essentially, you could build the most beautiful, most streamlined and automated platform. But if it's not something that people want or need, or if it's not something that people are necessarily asking for, I mean, sometimes they might be asking, but if it's something that doesn't fit your user base and nobody uses it, then you've invested a lot of time and energy into something that doesn't actually provide value. So the important part is to really just build for your users. And then figure out also, where are you, as a product, where are you tracking those features? Where are you documenting? I mean, this could just be a document in your internal documentation. But having that definition of what your platform is and is for and how to be able to use it is kind of an important part of the process as well. And that's just continuing to build that business value. And then another important thing is to plan for your day 2 operations. So once that is released, as with any product, what does maintenance look like? What does operational support look like? Because these are all going to be really important parts of being able to build that trust in the platform as well. And just communicate often with your users. You might not also have a dedicated product manager. That might not be something there's space for in your team yet, but who will own within that team the product management capabilities or responsibilities? So, minimum viable platform. This part I feel like is really fun because it's looking at now, as you're getting started, what can you do essentially to, advance the slide for one, to be able to build that quick win. And that's where you're, one, building your platform brand, providing value, and doing a lot of this rapid iteration. And when we talk about rapid iteration, this is looking at something that you can execute on within 6 weeks to a quarter, not 6 months to a year. Because if you go through this long discovery process, at that point, likely some of the needs and some of the current requirements or pains or whatever it is in your organization that you went to a lot of trouble to discover might have changed, and that things have been like really iterating rapidly in tech. So essentially it's looking at what slice is small enough for you to be able to start creating something that's of immediate value. It doesn't have to be the perfect end-to-end mega platform that has all of your wish list functionality and tools, just a base that you can start building off of, hence the MVP. And so for parts of this, you're building trust, you're figuring out who cares about this, who your stakeholders are, lining in on a problem that you need to solve, and then doing your design and build sprint, and from there, going into your user adoption. So in identifying stakeholders, I really love this quote from Kelsey, of course. This is a team sport. When you go solo, there can be consequences. So a culture of collaboration is great, but honestly, sometimes mandates can be really effective drivers. So depending on where you are in the org, if there is that requirement, it's not going to take you all the way through to the finish line, but oftentimes, some of you might have experienced a time when someone up in the leadership or that had that central, control of resources said, like, we have to do this, and that is a driver for other teams to start exploring and adopting where they fit into that. And sometimes you need to just answer that what's in it for me question for your developers or your leadership. Think about the things that they care about or their goals, and build the product or build the platform to maybe address some of those things that are already lined up with your leadership or your developer goals, because that just helps with getting your buy-in. So building a team, I think I am good timing-wise. But think about also what teams you have that can pave the way. You might not currently have support to be able to create your dedicated platform team that includes UX researchers and a product manager and your software engineers and your SRE and DevOps and everything. But maybe there are some folks there that are also really interested in these things. Do you have those people that are really excited about the automation that they're building, or the ones that are always getting at you to keep the documentation on processes up to date? Like, are there folks that you can enlist, and maybe there's ability to build a virtual team that can serve some of these functions? And when we were looking at this MVP as well, just think that this isn't something that you're trying to necessarily have to line it for an entire year. Like, can you collect a set of folks for long enough to be able to execute on that MVP so that you can continue to build exec and leadership buy-in to do this long term? Essentially, if you're thinking about it like a startup MVP or platform, how do you build on top of that runway so that you can get funding and support for the next round of when you're going to really build the meaningful types of features and capabilities? And if you do need just some research that helps to support building that case, this is another stat from the Dora report, where dedicated platform teams are the dominant organizational model, 76%, which is 3 out of 4 teams. So as mentioned before, renaming a team and calling it a platform team doesn't necessarily mean it's executing effectively on all platform capabilities, but this is another really great note. Just if you're trying to get that buy-in or make a case for why you need a platform team in your organization, to refer to something like this. So stakeholders, as mentioned, just find your champions and your sponsors across the team. Who do you need to be able to talk to understand the capabilities, and then also who is it that it's going to be using, actually using your platform? And I've been using developers generally, but also that's your data scientists, your application builders, your architects, a lot of other folks across the board. Next, solving problems. I might need to speed up just a tiny bit. So think about your user journeys, think about your pain points. There are some really great frameworks for being able to understand that: interviews, surveys, shadowing, value stream mapping. There's a ton of stuff about building this understanding of what is needed. And just look at everything from how things are onboarded, what your life cycle is for your deployment. Maybe how does a new vendor or tool get approved to be able to be used? Is that something that can be streamlined a little bit more, or does it take 6 months or 6 weeks to 4 months to be able to get a new tool approved through security review? How can some of those things be handled in a little bit more of a streamlined way? And what are other bottlenecks and places that friction appears? And then going into the next part is just defining that effective scope. Can you look at maybe a champion team that's already either experiencing a lot of pain, going through some change, or needs a lot of support, that is really willing to be able to work with you? And necessarily look at solving these massive global problems. Sometimes starting with a very small, sometimes boring solution is a really great place to make impact. Like, can something be streamlined in the way that documentation gets updated, or the way that security scanning before a feature is released happens? So things that are a small, achievable slice in a short amount of time. Some examples of some short-term features: automating some onboarding, documentation of processes, and then long-term, there may be some larger slices, like maybe there's a big legacy migration, or you want to get self-service dev environments in a very short amount of time. And then another piece of this is just thinking about what can be enforced, and what things that currently humans have to make decisions on can now be taken care of through features that are integrated into your platform. Design and build. So when we're looking at tooling, I'll just kind of go back to the old note. This is a reference that's from the platform engineering landscape. You can kind of take a look and see if you can map what you're currently using. All right, 5-minute check. What you're currently using to things that are in your environment right now. And then start really with your existing tools and define some of the golden paths around that. What guardrails do you need? What configuration flexibility is required? If you're deploying something, what are the decisions that need to be made at that moment? And what are things that are going to be the same for every service that you deploy, as one example. And then really engage with your users. If your platform isn't going to take care of a certain component, make sure your users know that. It's okay if your platform doesn't serve that, but if it's a known item, then at least there isn't another gap or layer of that cognitive overhead where somebody is going to have to make a decision that there isn't a very clear answer on. And as a last note, just don't add any extra complexity. This is just one example of maybe one workflow, in particular now because a lot of places are working on building these agentic applications, right? Not often are there opportunities for these completely greenfield places to be able to define and set everything up in this sort of golden way from the beginning, because there's a lot of legacy infrastructure. But this is something that's happening that we don't necessarily have a lot of great patterns for just yet. There's a great blog out there about just using Kubernetes for agentic apps. I won't go through all this workflow. Slides will be available at the end. But essentially, when you walk through what needs to happen, can you identify the steps in the process and where decisions need to be made? So the last bit, user adoption. Share your goals and outcomes with the team, and really evangelize the platform and use the communication methods that your team is already using. Like, if nobody reads the newsletters that go out about your internal products, like, that might not be the best place. Sometimes, do you need to just shoot things out on chat and have these small updates there? Show up at sprint stand-ups or other places. Like, where do people come out to listen, and where do people get their information? Like, use kind of those sources. And the same thing with feedback and measurement. That's going to be a really important part, is just the adoption of the platform. But also, don't necessarily add this entirely new framework of metrics. If there's nothing there, then you have a little bit of leeway to explore. But if there are already sets of metrics that are being collected or that the org really cares about, then line up with what's already in place. And then create that learning and experimentation culture, lunch and learn, demo days, training, and so on. Ways to be able to just continually encourage the adoption of the platform. And then finally, of course, just iterate. Like, how can you continue to build on top of that? Once you've got the MVP, bake in that time for ongoing iteration on the platform. When we're looking at this as a product and not a project usually has a start and finish, and when you're done, it's shipped, and you move on to the next project. But as a product, that's something that starts out at a baseline, your alpha release, and then gets built on top of, gets supported, there's operations, ongoing feature development, and so on. And so, long-term roadmap, continuing to build out your platform team, communicating with your stakeholders and champions, and just looking for those opportunities for learning and growth and feedback. And then the same thing for process. I mentioned a lot of these already with just communication, continuing to move these abstractions down into the platform, and then integrating all of the tools. And that's where, once you've got the MVP, usually starting with your existing stuff, where can you start to add on all of these really great tools that are out there now that are helping to introduce extra automation, to be able to take care of some of the security components, to be able to add in all of these shiny new AI features and so on, security and observability and so on. These are things that can also be iterated and added on top of. And since I am at time, I think the last bit I have is I still like these old framings around people, process, and technology, but use a process, not too much process, mostly agile, but essentially just adapt for the things that really fit with your own goals, your user goals, so that everyone can increase their platform happiness. I've got a link to a bunch of reference material, some really great talks. There are a lot of great communities out there, as mentioned. And I don't know if we'll have time for questions before the next talk. There is a mic over there, but I will be available here and also at the cloud booth tomorrow afternoon starting at 2 and Thursday morning. So happy to talk about anything related to platform. And I would also love some feedback, so if y'all can scan the QR code, any questions, comments, or notes are definitely welcome. So thank you all for being here.